They still see him walking here after dark. A young RAF airman, alone, following the edge of this runway like he's waiting for something to return. But when anyone moves toward him, he disappears before they reach him. And the strangest part is where he's seen. Not near the buildings, not near the museum. Always on the perimeter track, like he's still on duty. Because this isn't just an old airfield. This concrete launched Lancaster bombers into Berlin night after night. Therefore, the men who stood here understood something quietly terrifying. There was nearly a 50-50 chance they would never walk back across it. You're 19 years old. You've already watched 3 crews fail to return this month. You don't talk about it. Nobody does. But everyone counts. Because when a Lancaster doesn't come back, 7 men vanish with it. No graves, no funerals, just empty beds in the hut. You are stationed here with number 57 Squadron RAF, but a posting here means Berlin, Leipzig, Stuttgart. Therefore every briefing feels heavier than the last. You eat in the canteen, but the tables are getting quieter each week. You walk past the dispersal hardstands, but you recognize aircraft that returned without their crews. Shot through, burned, silent. Before night operations, many aircrew walked, not together, alone, along the perimeter, past the grass, past the hardstands, past the runway edge, because walking gave you something to do with the fear. And this is exactly where he's seen today. Head down, hands behind his back, walking the same route. The briefing map shows Berlin. Black so thick, crews described it as flying through black rain. Searchlights locking onto aircraft mid-air. Night fighters hunting in the dark. But you climb aboard anyway, because everyone else is. Therefore, nobody says what they're really thinking. I won't be coming back. Engines start. The ground shakes. You taxi slowly toward this runway. You pass other crews waiting their turn. Nobody waves. Because this might be the last time you see each other alive. Full throttle, heavy with bombs and fuel. The aircraft lifts into the night over Lincolnshire, and the last thing you see beneath you is this exact strip of concrete disappearing into darkness. That night, aircraft from this airfield do not return. 7 men at a time. Names recorded. Ages recorded, bodies never recovered. And their last footsteps on English soil were here, on this perimeter. On this concrete. Decades later, volunteers working here begin reporting something strange. Footsteps on hardstands when alone. Doors opening after being shut. The feeling of being watched near the runway edge. But more than once, someone sees a young airman walking the perimeter at dusk. Always the same description. Young, RAF uniform, purposeful walk. And when approached, he vanishes before they reach him. But one account goes further than that. One visitor describes something that didn't feel like a sighting, but an encounter. There is one account that gets repeated in different forms by people who have worked here. Always the same location. Always the same time of day. Just after sunset. One former visitor describes it like this. He says he was walking the perimeter track alone. No staff nearby. No aircraft movement. Just the wind across the concrete. He wasn't looking for anything. He wasn't doing anything unusual. But he noticed something ahead of him on the track. A figure. At first, he assumed it was another volunteer or night staff member. So he called out.
Hello?
No answer. He kept walking, and the closer he got, the more wrong it felt. He later described it as a kind of silence that didn't match the environment. Like even the wind had reduced around the figure. He says the man was standing perfectly still on the edge of the runway. Head slightly lowered, hands behind his back. RAF uniform. But what unsettled him wasn't the uniform, it was the stillness. No movement at all. Not shifting weight. Not turning, not reacting. Just waiting. So he stopped. He called out again.
Hello?
Louder. Still no response. And this is where the account becomes harder to explain clearly. He says the figure finally moved. Not toward him, not away, just a single step onto the concrete. Then stopped again. And at that exact moment, he described something that made him hesitate to continue forward. He said the air around the figure looked distorted, not like fog, not like heat haze, more like the edges of the person were not fully fixed in place. He felt, in his own words, like I was not being noticed at all. He decided to close the distance, just a few steps, to make contact. But as he did, the figure turned slightly, not fully facing him, just enough that he could see the side profile. And that's when he noticed something he hadn't processed before. The face was not detailed, not blurred exactly, just incomplete in memory. He could remember the uniform clearly, the posture clearly, the position on the runway clearly, but not the face. And then, according to him, the moment he realized that, something changed. The figure did not vanish in a flash, no sudden disappearance. Instead, it simply became less present with each step he took, like distance itself was erasing it, until there was nothing left on the runway at all. No sound, no movement, no trace. He checked the entire stretch of perimeter track. Nothing. The most disturbing part wasn't seeing the figure, it was the moment after. Because when he looked back toward the buildings, he realized something else. He had been walking the same route the figure had been standing on for the entire time, and he couldn't explain why he hadn't noticed that earlier. Why here? Why not inside a building? Why not near people? Because if you were a 19-year-old airman, and this was the last ground you ever stood on, this is where you would still be walking, waiting for your crew to return, waiting for a Lancaster that never came back. Bomber Command suffered a 44% fatality rate. Nearly half the men who flew never survived the war. Many of them took off from this runway, teenagers sent into the most dangerous role of the entire conflict, and dozens of them vanished into the night from here. And according to some accounts, that is when the airfield itself began to feel different. There is another account. This one comes from someone who was not visiting casually. He was part of a small overnight maintenance team working across the site. He says nothing unusual happened at first. No footsteps, no movement, no atmosphere shift, just routine checks along the perimeter in low light. But at one point he reached the far edge of the runway and stopped, because the floodlight ahead of him was already on. He does not remember it being switched on. He says it should not have been. It illuminated the concrete in a tight cone of light, and standing inside it was a figure, same description as before. Young RAF Airman, uniform, still posture. But this time there was no doubt it was being seen clearly. He did not approach immediately. He stayed where he was. Because something about the way the figure was standing felt wrong in time. Not moving, not reacting, not even acknowledging the light. Just positioned in the middle of it like it had always been there. Then, according to his account, something changed. A second set of footsteps appeared, not loud, not fast, just behind him. He turned immediately. Nothing, but when he turned back to the runway, the figure had moved closer. Not walking, not gliding, just closer than it had been a moment before. He says that is when he made a decision to speak. He called out.
Are you all right? Do you need help?
No response. Then he used the airfield radio. Still nothing. And this is where the account becomes difficult to place in normal terms. The floodlight began to flicker slightly, not fully cutting out, just enough to break the scene into fragments. Light, dark, light, dark. And every time the light returned, the figure was a little nearer. Until at one point, it was no longer standing in the center of the runway. It was at the edge of the light itself, just outside reach. That was the moment he stepped back without thinking. And in that exact second, the floodlight stabilized, fully bright, and the runway was empty. No movement, no figure, no sound. He checked the area immediately. There was nowhere to go, no cover, no access points, no time for distance. But nothing was there. He never reported it as a sighting at first. He only mentioned it later, unofficially. And when he did, he added one detail he could not explain. The air around the floodlight felt colder than anywhere else on the airfield. Not cold like weather, cold like something had been removed. So when someone sees that lone figure at the edge of the airfield, head down, hands behind his back, you're not looking at a ghost story. You're looking at a wartime routine that never ended. And after dark, they still see him walking. As always. As we come to the end of this journey with our hero Airman of Lancashire, it's worth remembering that behind every shadow, after every unexplained sighting and every lingering story, there was once a very real human life. These places aren't just haunted by mystery, they're shaped by history. By young men that took off into the dark and never returned. By those who waited, by those who endured, and by sacrifices made on all sides of a war that changed the world forever. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, what remains undeniable is the weight these places still carry, a quiet echo of the past that refuses to fully fade. So tonight, as we close this chapter, we remember them, not as stories, but as people. All of them. Lest we forget. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe so you don't miss the next history behind the haunting video, and I would also be really grateful if you could hit the like button too. Until next time, take care. See you in a bit.